So the last presentation at this session is about the methodological support for Swedish industry to meet vulnerability risks in the use of open source software. With Johan Linåker at RISE, the HASMOS project investigates how companies can get an overview, understand, and evaluate the health, quality, and security of the open source software that they're using, knowingly or not, or considering to take in. Please.
Cool, thanks. Yes, my name is Johan Linåker. I'm a senior researcher at RISE, and as just mentioned, I'm presenting the Vinnova-funded project HASMOS, Health and Security Management for Open Source Software. So it's been running now for almost 1.5 years. It's a quite research-focused project, as mentioned, where the main goal here is to enable software-intensive organizations, and I'm referring just intentionally primarily to industry, but this is very relevant for public sector today as well, in enabling the evaluation of open source components in the intake process, but also getting an overview of what you're actually running in production. So to evaluate what risks are you taking and put that into contrast to what risks are you willing to take and how can you manage these risks. You can't mitigate them, but you can proactively go in and try to reduce them or make an appropriate sourcing decision. But to put some more context, so open source, it's basically a type of a building brick that's used to build products, tools, infrastructure, both in companies, but also a society at large. Everything ties together, and we can find open source or this open source type of building block basically everywhere. But the question a lot of people, a lot of companies forget to ask, can we trust this piece here? They just take it for granted. They saw that Facebook is using it, so yeah, it must be safe. Or it's been around for 10+ years, must be safe. Or seen some review of it in a appropriate form, must be safe. Well, continuing with the Lego analogy, if you get this brick or a build from Lego, you can be assured that Lego has actually had a team that's quality assured a certain percentage of all the bricks. And if something goes wrong, so I bought my son a Lego Ninjago Dragon for Christmas, and it was missing 3 bricks. I sent them an online form, and I got the bricks home in a letter 1 week later. But what about the open source that you use? This is maintained by communities of individuals or organizations or everything in between. Things can happen, and this can really, a lot of things can happen. So how should you look at this open source project, this brick? There's so many different angles and so many different types of experiences that goes into this. And the thing here, maybe you can look at one brick. So you might think that this is what you're using, but actually this is what you're using. If you really look behind it, the dependencies are large. They keep growing. Everything grows together. And reviewing, I mean, if this sounded manageable in some sense, what about this? So open source really is part of our digital infrastructure, society at large. And just as with physical infrastructure, it needs maintenance in order to stay secure and robust. I know roads, bridges, they need maintenance, and we hopefully can trust our government to see to that the paving and that the pillars and everything on the bridges and everything we drive or the trains or the tracks that we take, they are secure. But for open source, again, this is maintained by communities and you're using it as is. at your own risk. So you really need to consider how well maintained this is, how much can we trust it. And here comes the concept of open source health that we use, basically looking at an open source project's capability to stay viable and stay maintained over time, long term, without interruption or weakening. But how can you evaluate this? Just to break it down a bit, we can talk about an open source project's productivity. How active is the development? How active is the communication, the collaboration? The robustness. Is the development closed? Is it only one individual, one company running the show? Are they open to input from others? Are you able to come in and contribute your fixes? Or others? How are CVs managed? And the openness, are you able to go in and steer the direction in a certain manner? Or maybe this was more the robustness, the more how concentrated is it to one individual or one organization? Because looking at an individual, he or she may be doing this in their spare time, and things change. Family situation differentiate or evolves, interests evolves. It may be that they don't have the time or the interest, or they're doing this as part of their work. And the company that they're working for, they pivot, they refactor, they throw it out, they don't care anymore. So how can we find these cracks or potential cracks before they appear? And if they appear, how can we fix them before they grow? So how can we avoid them, but also how can we proactively go in and try to address them? So this is the goal of the HASMOS project. So we want to consider the health of our project in the intake process before you take it in, but also looking at what you're using already. Because, again, things change. You maybe did an analysis when you took it in, but then 2 years down the road, you're still using it, but a lot of things could happen during those 2 years. So again, we want to enable a health analysis at the intake process, but also ongoingly, both on maybe more lower level components, open source components, but also on the more acquisition level if you're considering of taking in more larger components or systems. Looking from the public sector perspective in public procurement, being able to evaluate open alternatives to proprietary alternatives. So this is the HASMOS project and our partners. So again, this is quite research intensive. So it's been mainly driven by RISE, but in close collaboration with the BRICT, who's here today. Also we have a partner, Scania and Adelot, a consultancy. So the BRICT, for those who don't know, maybe Micro Focus is a better label. They recently acquired by Micro Focus. So they provide a tool to quantitatively look at the concept of health. So what we're really trying to do is to see, okay, what of these different aspects of health can be quantified to enable a more quick overview of what you're looking at. So we want to both enable the more larger quantitative overview of what you're using, but also have a more qualitative analysis in an intake process. But also, say you have 30,000 open source components in production. You can't go in and look at each project in detail, so you need to have some kind of system in place that allows you to put out the red, orange flags, so you know where you should go in and look. So we want to provide support on both levels. And then we're working close with Scania, trying to adapt this as something implementable that can be operationalized in their context, and hopefully this can be a case to take off from when in looking or considering to take this into other contexts. So what we initially did was we looked through the scientific literature. We found 146 studies identifying 107 different characteristics or aspects of health. So this concept of health, 107 different ways in how you can look at it. That's quite a lot. Over 15 different themes. But in practice, so we interviewed 17 experts across the globe, different levels of experience, specifically on this concept of health, and also specifically within Scania as well, as this is a case where we're going into. So what we found here is that they validate a lot of what we find in literature. They put emphasis on some aspects, for example, the importance of checking your dependencies, seeing what's in there, and also highlighting this problematic sense that you can't go through this. We need automation, we need tooling to support it. Also, they emphasize the need to consider the type of project you're looking at. So a yellow brick can't be analyzed the same or as a blue brick, for example, or if they are of different sizes. So size and complexity, for example, you can't have the same expectations or consider health in the same way for a small, tiny JavaScript component that pushes the comma or the delimiter 2 steps to the right, compared to maybe Kubernetes or a large-scale open source project. Another aspect that affects is the strategic importance. Is this really important to you? Then it adds other requirements, or that you have higher requirements on what risks you're willing to take. Life cycle perspective, if it's stable, it's been around for 20 years, then maybe you have other expectations rather than a project that is in the growth phase. And also, who's running the show? Is it one individual, or is it a company that may pivot, change the license or whatever? So this is an ongoing study, and we're landing now trying to wrap the what do you call it, the sack, and come up with the more final framework that we will evaluate in more ongoing observations, both at Scania and potential other cases as well, and see what's reasonable, what's important, how can this be operationalized and not be just a high-level beauty cloud. That's just theoretical. Yeah, and that's basically the future work. Cool.